start over. Deja vu.
This happened last time.
We're good now? Okay. Deja vu, it's like 2020 all over again. Wait, it is 2021. Sorry, everyone, and rolling back everything that we just said back to the opening.
2021.
So
Take two.
Take two. Let's try this again.
So thank you everyone for showing up today. As you can see, we're in really good spirits and we're really excited about being able to have the conference today. It's just great that we can, even in light of the ongoing pandemic situation, things like that affecting a lot of different conferences. And the planning leading up to them. So this is still a big deal. We've got an amazing set of presentations today covering a whole slew of different topics. So again, thanks for joining us. And before we get on to other things, we want to first extend a big welcome to the newest B-Side Charlotte board member. So Drew, would you take that away for the intro?
Yes, hi, good morning, everybody. I'm Drew Green, the treasurer for B-Side Charlotte, and I have my co-treasurer, Daniel here, who's our newest B-Sides board member, rocking his B-Side Charlotte gear, which you can find in our online store at linked at BSidesCLT.org. Wanted to give a big shout out to our sponsors this year. Shout out, quite literally. So with John Mazza with Summerfield Wealth Advisors and Secure Code Warrior, they have been repeated sponsors at least last year and this year, and Secure Code Warrior is our CTF sponsor this year, and John Mazza has always been a diehard B-Sides supporter, not just for us, but other B-Sides groups across the state and the Southeast. So big thank you to both for continued support of B-Sides. We also wanted to say big thank you to our donors this year. We had many donors, and all of our donations help us to provide gifts for speakers, book venues for next year, and just take care of all the operations that require some kind of upfront deposits. And then what we like to do is have our sponsors usually sort of cover the costs annually, and then we sort of roll it forward. So we're sort of on a rolling budget. We're a nonprofit 501c3, so any and all donations from sponsors or donors helps us put this on for y'all. So with that, I'm gonna pass it along. Thank you again, everybody, and hope you have a great time this year.
Thanks, Drew. And yeah, just to really quickly follow up on the sponsors and donors bit, we definitely can't do it without you. So thank you very much for that. We try and run as lean a budget and as lean expenses as we can, but it does cost money to run things. So a huge thank you for everybody who's helped with that. So again, we have an amazing set of presentations, both offensive, defensive today. So there should be a lot of different things to cover everybody's interest, something for everybody. But in addition to that, ignore my rain, IoT devices, no. In addition to that, the theme for this year is open mic. So in line with that, you'll note in Discord, in the conference channels, there's 3 new channels down there for open mic text and open mic voice and things of that sort. Those channels are there for you to use through the course of the conference to have different conversations, different chats about cybersecurity topics amongst yourselves. So feel free to use those as you see fit during the conference. We also hope that you and encourage you to attend as many talks as you would like. There are 2 tracks, so there's a lot of stuff going on, but in the event that you have an extra minute or 2 or free time or whatever, feel free to drop into those channels and say hi to your fellow condors. So I guess before we get to Jeannie with an intro for our keynote, I did want to point out that this conference, again, we're virtual this year. Last year we made that decision for COVID. This year we did as well. We're definitely planning for in-person in 2022. We're a lot more comfortable with where things are looking now. They're not great, but we trust that things will improve by that point. So stay tuned. Closing ceremonies will provide details on 2022 and what that looks like to hopefully move primarily out of virtual space. We will likely still continue to have a virtual presence because having this virtual platform has been an amazing opportunity to bring other speakers to you from a presentation standpoint that we otherwise would have had a lot more difficulty doing. We did so last year with international speakers, and again this year with two of our presentations being remote internationally, one in Germany and one from Mumbai. So thank you to those presenters. We know that there's a time difference there as well, where all of those presenters are going to be in chat with you as their presentations are going on. So if there's any questions that you have, feel free to ask in the track channel appropriate to the talk, and they'll be watching that to be able to interact and answer questions as things are going on. So with all that said, now I want to hand it over to Jeannie for an intro to our amazing keynote speaker, Mr. Jeff Mann. Jeannie, take it away.
Hi, everybody. I am Jeannie Rogers. I'm the co-chair of B-Sides Charlotte. I also run FoxPig. And yes, we are so sorry we are not in person because we miss y'all immensely. I hope y'all know that. We will be at B-Sides Augusta next week. So if anybody's around, we will be in person there. Masked up and gloved up and everything. Don't worry about it. But we do miss Charlotte immensely. Y'all are in our hearts. So we can't wait for next year with our new games and everything. So without further ado, we have our wonderful keynote today, Mr. Jeff Mann. He is a respected information security advocate, advisor, evangelist, international speaker, keynoter, host of Security and Compliance Weekly, co-host on Paul Security Weekly, Tribe of Hackers Red Team, Tribe of Hackers Security Leaders, Tribe of Hackers Blue Team, and currently serving in a consulting advisory role for online business systems. Nearly 40 years of experience working in all aspects of computer, network, and information security, including cryptography, risk management, vulnerability analysis, compliance assessment, forensic, I can't believe I'm talking, forensic analysis and penetration testing, certified NSA Cryptanalyst, previously held security research, management, and product development roles with the National Security Agency, the DoD, and private sector enterprises, and was part of the first penetration testing Red Team at NSA. For the past 25 years, has been a pen tester, security architect, consultant, QSA, and PCI SME, providing consulting and advisory services to many of the nation's best-known companies. And yes, I've had coffee, but no, apparently it didn't work. But please, thank you, and to everyone to welcome Mr. Jeff Mann. Have a wonderful time.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the introduction, Jeannie. And thank you, B-Sides Charlotte, for giving me the opportunity to speak here today. It's always a mixed bag having to do the virtual versus real. I much would prefer to be real. I think everybody would. Ironically, when I ran in to some of the organizers live in Vegas, and they mentioned that they were needing a keynote, and I said, yeah, I'd be happy to do a keynote. I'm actually in North Carolina right now. I spent the early part of the week in Asheville area, and now I'm in Raleigh-Durham, and I got here yesterday not realizing or forgetting that B-Sides Raleigh-Durham was yesterday. I'm hanging out with some close family friends, otherwise I might have crashed the party last night. So if anybody's on from B-Sides Raleigh-Durham, sorry I missed you. I guess the technical details should be, let me see if I can share my screen and make it work so everybody can see the slides that I'm about to share with you. So let's do that technical thing first here. Does it look good? Somebody say yes verbally, because I don't see the chat or anything. Anyone? Anyone? All right, I'll open up the chat just to make sure. All right, I'm assuming we're good, and I'm assuming you can see my slides. I mentioned, of course, that I am in North Carolina. I love North Carolina. I'm wishing that I could be down in Charlotte and enjoying barbecue with you guys. I used to work for a company that was headquartered near Charlotte. We used to love to go to Bubba's Barbecue. So to jump into the talk that I want to share with you this morning, Jeannie, rattled off my bio. I've been in this business a long time. It's rather an extensive career, and I've been very fortunate in the opportunities I've had throughout my career. I'll give you a brief, here's a brief synopsis of what you just heard Jeannie telling you. One of the purposes of this talk that I put together, and full disclosure, I gave this talk initially a couple weeks ago at GERCON, actually live, and I'll apologize ahead of time. Some of the slides are oriented towards audience participation, which obviously is going to be difficult this morning in the virtual space. But the title of my talk, Hackers Are Neither Created Nor Destroyed, is partially because back in the former times, after speaking at conferences, I would very often get approached by people asking me various variations of a question. How do I become a hacker? How do I get into cybersecurity? How do I get into red teaming, pen testing? How do I do this? And variation would be, well, how'd you get into it? And I usually just tell the story, well, I started at NSA, and that's usually as far as I go with it, because most people think, well, oh, okay, NSA, that's obviously a pedigree within our space. If that doesn't make sense to you, when I started at NSA, I started in an organization where the name of the organization was Information Security. So that was kind of our main business. We weren't a company that was also building widgets or selling widgets or producing software or equipment or anything like that. Our focus actually was information security. And I was lucky enough to be born at a time where I grew up in the very beginnings of the internet, and we used to call it internet security, and on to where we are today. So, a lot of how I got to where I am is simply just being at the right place at the right time. And I think if you ask a lot of people, that's sort of a way that a lot of people venture into this space. This is where it's like, okay, I haven't seen everybody in 2 years because of the lockdown. And of course, we're virtual again. But some of the things that I've been doing over the last couple of years, which also is sort of a segue into what I want to talk about today. Jeannie mentioned I'm a host of Paul Security Weekly. Paul actually gave me my own show just about 2 years ago called Security and Compliance Weekly, where I was either rewarded by always talking about compliance. I talk about PCI a lot, or he put me off in a corner. Still not sure which one it was, but the goal of this podcast, at least for me, is to try to bring together multiple communities within our field of cybersecurity. I've spent the last couple years going to hacker conferences, a lot of B-Sides, all the big name conferences. I saw somebody tweet this morning, apparently we're somewhere around the anniversary of when DerbyCon would be, and somebody put out the obligatory Trevor Forget tweet. If you don't know what that is, you're probably better off, in my opinion, but I'm a grumpy old man. But I also go to security conferences, more of the vendor side of conferences, type of conferences, information security conferences, compliance conferences. The PCI industry has their own conference. And something that's impressed me over the past couple of years when we were doing these things live was there's a lot of smart people all over this industry, and there's a lot of people doing great things. And very often they don't know that the other side exists. And so one of the main focuses of my show is to try to bring in people from both sides, or both silos, both, and there's more than two really, but bring in multiple people, multiple personalities, multiple people that are smart, doing great things, interesting things, have stories to tell, to expose the other side to, oh, there's people like me over there, and they're doing a lot of the same things. Because this is a huge industry. At the end of the day, there's so much responsibility. There's so much complexity to all the nuances of what we do in this thing called cybersecurity, and lots of supporting roles, lots of frontline roles, but all told, we're all in this together. Jeannie mentioned the Tribe of Hackers books. The last two books were published in the previous year or so. I'm actually one of two people that are in all four books in the series. I'll let you do you'll have to go buy all the books so you can figure out who the other person is. I'll give you a hint, also ex-NSA. And of course, Marcus Carey, also ex-NSA. Oh, one more thing on the Tribe of Hackers. I'll give you a sneak preview. I was approached a month or so ago. They're getting ready to put the Tribe of Hackers series on audiobooks, release them on audiobooks, and they've invited all the contributors to the books to read their own chapters. And I should back up and say, if you're not familiar with the Tribe of Hackers books, they are a series where the author, editor Marcus Carey and Jen Jin, they put together a survey, a series of questions. How'd you get your start in security? What are your triumphs and losses? What would you do again if you could? All sorts of different types of questions, and they put these questions out to all sorts of people in the industry that are recognized in their fields of expertise, and obviously call them hackers. So every chapter of each book is a different person responding to the same questions. It's a fascinating series, very, very informative and educational. I highly recommend it to everybody. And stay tuned, it's going to be an audiobook. So I'm going to be in the next couple weeks recording my chapter of the first book, and I think over the course of the next 6 months or so they'll get through all the books. So kind of a cool opportunity, and I'm looking forward to it. Also, in the last year or so, I've been involved over the last couple of years with an organization, also a nonprofit called Hack for Kids. Hopefully, some of you have heard of it. It's an organization that's focused on teaching not only the technical skills to young people, but also hacking skills. So they very often put on as a group sort of mini conferences just for kids as part of other regular hacker security conferences, and do a lot of the same things in terms of capture the flag exercises, having lockpick villages. One of the fun things they do is they get people to volunteer and donate old equipment of any kind. It could be TVs, VCRs, computers, tablets, whatever, and they let kids just rip them apart, break them apart. No agenda, just tear this thing apart, see what you think, experience it. Anyway, I spoke for them a couple years ago at their main conference, which is in Chicago, and they asked me to join the board, and we came up with this title of Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. My focus is trying to make sure that what Hack for Kids and what we're doing as a community to bring others up and bring others into the field is something that's available for everyone, regardless of race, religion, creed, ethnicity, orientation, culture, geographic location, whatever. I mean, one thing I think we as a country learned in the past year and a half is that there's a lot of disparity just in terms of opportunity for access to technology and internet, frankly, throughout the country, depending on where you happen to be born by no fault of your own. So that's something that I'm interested and passionate about, and always open to ideas. And if anybody has ideas or wants something like Hack for Kids to come to their area, please reach out and talk. Let me know. Let any of us know. I have a day job. I work for a company called Online Business Systems. I work in the PCI field as what's called a Qualified Security Assessor, or QSA. My job is to go into companies that are responsible for meeting PCI data security requirements, and I assess whether they're actually following the rules and doing everything that they're supposed to be doing. I do that, and I've been doing that for 17 years. Why I like doing it and why I talk about PCI, my little PCI moment, is PCI is a solid framework for basic security things that everybody should be doing no matter what. Most of the companies that have to do it are not companies that are historically involved in security or have security as part of their fabric, organizational structure. It's not part of their history. And so they don't understand it. So I spend a lot of time just trying to explain what it all means and putting it in context, because I think it's very reasonable if you understand security requirements. Most people will say, well, that makes sense. Yeah, we should do that. And that gets you over the hurdle of people doing the bare minimum, just want the checkbox, which, if you've heard of PCI, it very often is labeled as a checkbox compliance exercise, which unfortunately a lot of people treat it like that. I'm sort of on a mission to try to dispel that attitude and try to get people to understand, no, this is basic security stuff that you need to do in an organization. Anyway, enough of the PCI minute. This is the company I work for. We're a consulting practice primarily. We do a lot of the compliance things. We do security architecture, recommend solutions. We have a security testing team. We've got a pretty decent team of pen testers, web app testers, so on and so forth. And we get a lot of work, so we're always hiring. So keep that in mind if you are job seeking now or in the future. If you've heard me speak at other conferences, or conferences talks are very often available online on YouTube. One of the things that I did early on in my career at NSA as a cryptographer was work with the U.S. Special Forces. Back in those days, they used a paper one-time pad for communications, and I developed a little cryptographic cipher wheel, specially designed to be able to work with the one-time pad that the Special Forces used. They called it the whiz wheel. I came to find out. The last real DEF CON before the shutdown back in 2019, I happened to meet a guy that was ex-Special Forces that remembered using my wheel. And over the course of the lockdown, he happened to also be the chapter president for the Special Forces Association, which, as you can imagine, is for ex-Special Forces, ex-Green Berets. But they have associate membership available. And he said, you would qualify because, what you did really helped the mission. So long story short, he was able to get me a lifetime membership into the Special Forces Association. He helped me apply for it. And I was given a lifetime membership. I used to spend a lot of time in Fayetteville, North Carolina. So there's a little bit of a North Carolina connection here as well, in the Fayetteville area, of course, at Fort Bragg. One other thing, or among other things that are notable, is I was interviewed actually along with Marcus Carey for an episode of Darknet Diaries, where I tell pretty much the origin story of how penetration testing got started at NSA back in the early to mid 1990s. I'm embarrassed and shocked to say that it's been almost 30 years since I started penetration testing and doing, internet security, trying to break into computers and networks, which just makes me feel old and makes me feel tired. One other thing that happened is, and sort of is the segue into this talk, ultimately, or one of the reasons, is I was asked to become an advocate for another nonprofit called Hacking is Not a Crime. And speaking of hacking, that's one of the reasons that got me thinking about, what does it mean to be a hacker? How do I know I'm a hacker? How do I become a hacker? How do I get the skills? How do I learn hacking skills? It all kind of jumbled together in my mind. But part of it, frankly, was when I was asked to join this group and I was reading through, some of their bylaws and mission statements and so on and so forth. To be honest, my initial knee-jerk reaction is, every time I'm approached by someone that says, how do I become a hacker? In my mind, I think, if you have to ask that question, you're probably not a hacker. But I'm always trying to check myself, because I don't want to be arrogant and think, well, I'm a hacker and you're not, and therefore I'm better than you. I think it's more to the point, and this is what I want to try to bring out in this talk this morning, is that it's more important to find out who you are, and find out what you're good at, what you like to do, what you have some talent or aptitude or potential to do, and pursue that. And it's not really, this is for the people that may not be hackers. It doesn't matter if you're not a hacker. You can still excel and exceed and have a lot of fun and a lot of satisfaction and success, which is a weird word, because how do you define that in this industry, pursuing so many things, because there's so many different things you can do in this industry. If you do happen to be a hacker, what I'm going to talk about could help reinforce and maybe make you feel a little bit more accepted, or ooh, I'm not the only one that thinks like this or acts like this or does this. But this organization essentially is trying to do, I think, one of two things, at a high level. One is to try to dispel the notion that hacker means a bad guy, which is the part that I'm like kind of the least interested in, because we in this industry, and I've been in this industry, and especially in the computer hacking, internet hacking space, essentially from the beginning. This has been an argument that's been going on for 30 years and counting, and I don't think we're ever going to really shift the mindset. Doesn't mean we don't try, but I think more importantly, the other goal of this organization is to try to promote and help out with proposed legislation that tries to make hacking activities illegal. And I think that's more the key element of this organization, is to try to make sure that the inaccurate mindset of or beliefs about what it means to be a hacker or what hacking is doesn't negatively impact the hacking community, especially within the realm of computer, internet, technology hacking that we do today. They have also key tenets, and I can put them up here, let you read them. Of course, you can find the website and learn more about this organization. I will have a get off my lawn moment as a grumpy curmudgeon. And one of the tenets they point out there that I've highlighted is they're trying to discourage the use of the terminology white hat versus black hat, to define good and bad, because of the racial overtones, the ethnic overtones, how we as a society have tried to move away, shift away from white meaning good, black meaning bad, which I get. I mean, but this has been around in our culture for a long time. I kind of tend to think that it's not necessarily the origins in terms of a racial thing, and undermining people that don't look like me. I'd like to think it's more a contrast scientifically, sort of the opposite ends of the spectrum to point out that there's a huge difference. I point out this one in particular because I will probably slip and say white hat or black hat at some point, and I apologize ahead of time. But for this morning's lesson in race relations, and I put this slide back in at the last minute because Tori mentioned Star Trek, and I had to remove this because I didn't want to go down this road. But if you want to have the classic lesson on why racism is stupid, go back to Star Trek, the original series, and find an episode, I think it's called Let This Be Your Last Battle, where these two planets have been at war for, decades, centuries, and because they're different. And you have to look carefully, and this is where it's easier to have audience participation and people shout back, but these two people are different, and because they're different, they fought wars and were killing each other for years and years and years. And of course, Captain Kirk and the Enterprise came in and saved the day and helped them understand that their differences were stupid. But look carefully. The difference between them, and this is the beauty of Star Trek and at least the original series, the societal lessons that they tried to teach and the societal norms that they went after. One person here is black on the right side, white on the left side, while the other one is the opposite, white on the right side, black on the left side. It takes you a while to see it, but I thought this was the classic example of pointing out why racism is stupid. So my nod to Star Trek and the brilliance of the original series and all the other series, but I'm an original series kind of guy. I want to spend a few minutes just talking about, some of the things that Hacking is Not a Crime is trying to tackle in a visual sense, of course. The depictions in Hollywood, of course, of hackers, I could have spent a whole, hour just talking about all the depictions. I just tried to capture some. Here's some of the boys that we know from, Hollywood depictions. Of course, there are women hackers out there, and more than I can put on one slide. What I thought was interesting when I was looking for these images is typically, and there's exceptions to every rule, but typically or very often the male hackers, they are the bad guys in the movies and the TV shows. Not all the time, of course, and very often the women are the ones that are the good guys, the ones that are doing things for the side of good, trying to catch the bad guys. For a live audience at this point, I would ask an opinion poll. This is because Paul Asadori and I have sort of this running bet, because we ask this question of our guests on the main show, Paul Security Weekly: what's your favorite hacker movie? And his favorite hacker movie is Hackers. My favorite hacker movie is Sneakers, and we each have our reasons why. So this is sort of, I always like to find out, and we're sort of keeping an informal tally of, which one of us is right, type of thing. In the context, because this is a virtual talk, and it was pointed out to me after I did this at GERCON the other week, there are a lot of younger people in this community that actually may not have seen these movies, therefore don't know what they're about. So rather than asking you what's your favorite hacker movie, just very quickly, the movie War Games, and this is an encouragement. If you haven't seen any of these movies, go watch them, because this is sort of hacker history. This is our community and our industry's history. Perhaps the first and most classic, and arguably is the best, but I'll tell you why my favorite movie is Sneakers in a moment. But this movie came out in the early 80s, 1980s, so almost 40 years ago, and it was a tale of, at the end of the day, artificial intelligence and machine learning and the potential of what could go wrong. But it showed the early days of hacking, which was over phone lines, and it was very slow, and there wasn't a whole lot of graphics. It was all very textual. I don't want to give a spoiler, but that's War Games, early 80s. The next movie that's sort of a classic hacker movie is a movie called Sneakers. If you work in as a penetration tester, red teamer, do any type of testing for other companies, This movie is the model essentially for the methodology that you follow. This movie came out in the early 1990s. There is also a classic line in this movie that, and I don't have it memorized even after all these years, but basically it says, it's all about the information. You know, there's a war being waged, and it's not with missiles and guns and bullets. It's all about data. I think, you know, that is prescient, and I think it holds true today. And of course, the third movie, which is called Hackers, came out in 1995. So all these movies are old. It, in my opinion, and this is where Paul and I diverge, it's the movie that introduced hacker culture, the idea that you're a community, you're a tribe, you're a pod of people that kind of know what's going on and are out to defeat evil, defeat the man, defeat the organized government, defeat Big Brother, have fun, do cool things, know all about this cool new technology. I encourage you to watch these movies. Hackers, of course, do have an image problem, and I also went out to do a search of like, okay, who are the world's best hackers? Who are the most famous hackers? There's thousands of lists out there. Some names show up a lot, but a lot of disagreement. Most of the lists, again, are white guys, but there are other lists that have women on the list. And again, most of these lists, the best famous hackers are all, I shouldn't call them bad guys or good guys, but they're all people that have been arrested, prosecuted, perhaps have served jail time, and of course maybe have reformed and turned to the side of good. I'll let you be the judge. But you know, there is an image problem. I think most people acknowledge this. I'm sure you guys have all seen some sorts of media representation, this classic hooded, faceless, dark, ominous hacker person. And this is one of those images that I think that we're trying to dispel. I can go on and on and on. My question simply is, and I ask this of myself, you know, how many black hoodies is too many to have? I have probably about a dozen of them. Anyway, I want to shift gears a little bit and sort of get into the essence of the talk. And the essence of the talk is hackers are neither created nor destroyed. I believe, and I could be right or wrong, and I'm happy to be proven wrong, but I kind of believe that you're either a hacker or you're not. And I know this because I'm a hacker. And I want to qualify that. I often forget my own advice, which is don't assume that people know what you're talking about. When I say I'm a hacker, I'm talking about a mentality, a lifestyle, almost a worldview, an approach to just how I see things. I was a computer network security, internet security hacker for many years, but I have not done hands-on trying to break into systems for quite a few years. I don't do computer hacking anymore, but I still claim to be a hacker, and I'm very comfortable in saying I'm a hacker. And in fact, becoming a computer hacker is what began the road of discovery to figure out that I am a hacker. And the essence of what I want to share with you for the remainder of our time is how we got there. You know, part of me is like, you know, again, as I was doing the research and I look up the actual dictionary definition of the word hacker, which is something that I like to do just in general, is figure out, okay, let's start with a definition before we get into deep discussions about any kind of topic. So when I first looked it up, I'm like, is this really something we want to discuss? But don't worry, there's more to the definitions. And you'll see even in dictionaries that there's a definition of hacker that represents the good, and there's a definition of hacker that represents the bad. So in order to properly frame this, I want to use myself as an example, and you know, sort of talk to you about how I figured out that I'm a hacker, and figured out, more importantly, how to use my mindset and the peculiar way that I see the world to do something hopefully that's positive in terms of the whole industry and helping companies be more secure and so on and so forth. So my origin story, which is me attempting to answer the question a little bit more in detail. How did I get my start in information security or cybersecurity? How did I become a hacker? How do I know that I'm a hacker? I mentioned, of course, that I usually just say I started at the National Security Agency. I want to walk through the process, though, because it occurred to me, how did I get my start in the industry? How did I become this? Is really the question is, how did I get to NSA? And that's what I want to focus on for a few minutes here. When I first started at the National Security Agency, which was back in 1986, 35 years ago, NSA was going through a hiring spree. What they were looking for first and foremost and primarily were what they called the critical skills of computer science, mathematics, and engineering. You can loosely think of this in terms of things that we're familiar with today. So STEM, we didn't call it STEM back then, we called it critical skills. If you had a degree in any of these disciplines, you were offered a job at NSA. If you were in school studying these, NSA would show up at job fairs. NSA did recruiting from college campuses. If you got the degree, you were hired. They did this, they hired thousands of people this way. I went to work at NSA. I was neither of these. I'm still none of these disciplines. I actually have a business degree. So I had to go a different route. And this is what I want to focus in on. I'm going to talk to you kind of about how I got there, and what I want you guys to think about is, because I'm thinking about it, is how did NSA know that I would succeed and be able to do the job at NSA? I had to apply. I had to fill out an application, mail it in the mail, provide them all of my information, college transcripts and stuff. But ultimately, I was invited onto the campus, Fort Meade, for a couple days worth of skills tests, aptitude tests. I had to have a physical, a psych exam. How I passed that, I don't know, so on and so forth. All I knew at the time was NSA liked to hire people who had liberal arts degrees, and I happened to go to a liberal arts college, so I think that was in my favor. I also knew or came to know that they want people with clean records, or people that were trustworthy. That back in think 30 years ago, it was a major issue for hiring if you did any kind of drugs. Had alcohol problems, gambling problems, cheated on your spouse, girlfriend, had alternate lifestyles. Any of those types of things were issues. Now, NSA, when I went through the hiring process, they wanted, they'd hook you up to a polygraph machine, and they wanted to know all your dirty little secrets. Not so much to preclude you from employment, although that happened, but also to make sure that they knew what your secrets were, so you couldn't be blackmailed, because there had been espionage cases. This is back in the days of the Soviet Union and the Cold War, where people were compromised and committed treason, U.S. citizens, by being blackmailed, so that it wouldn't come out that they were cheating on their spouse, or more importantly, it wouldn't come out that they were homosexual. You may remember the inventor of the computer, the one that broke the Enigma machine in World War II, Alan Turing. He was homosexual, and it was a time when it was illegal, and he actually, the story. We've come a long way, and fortunately, and still have further to go. But so that's some of the background stuff. The tests that I had to take, the 2 days worth of aptitude tests, I wish I remembered all of them, and I wish I could display all of them. The one that I remember the most is they gave you a picture, a geographic, two-dimensional drawing of a three-dimensional object, and they would ask you, what does this look like from behind? What does this look like from the right or the left? And then they give you, other pictures and options, and you're supposed to identify what it is that people, what the object looked like from the various perspectives. I found that easy. Apparently not everybody can do it. Other tests were, they gave you a made-up language, a language that didn't exist. It was just gobbledygook, but they asked you, it had structure, and they asked you, could you identify the structure? Can you figure out what the nouns are? Can you figure out what the verbs are, and all the other parts of speech? Another test was, they gave you samples of collection traffic. Now, back in those days, the information that was collected was mostly out of the air. It was radio signals. Ironically, very similar to network traffic in terms of the signals would have, essentially header information. There's to and from and timestamps, source and destination, things like that. Very similar. So, to try to give you a picture of what I'm talking about, they would give you all this traffic, and they would ask you questions like, can you figure out who's in charge? Is there an address that messages are originating from more than others? Can you figure out the chain of command? These were messages that were, going from governments to armies to battalions to various levels of leadership and authority within a military organization. So they ask you to try to figure out what the structure was. What kind of information could you get from it? NSA calls that traffic analysis. What kind of useful information can you get from that? Stuff that we still do today with network traffic, but we call it different things. But in essence, it's the same kind of stuff that NSA had been doing for years and years. What impresses me, and this is an ongoing sort of research project that I'm doing, is the fascination that NSA knew how to find someone like me. And I gave a very condensed version of this talk a couple days ago for another group in North Carolina, which I'll talk about later on. But it sort of clicked in my head at that point. And this is a message that I think a lot of us, especially the ones of us that are hackers or identify as hackers, I think will resonate with you. Given today's standards, given NSA standards back then, looking for people that had a certain pedigree, to put it in today's terms, looking for people to hire into this industry that have certain certifications, that have a degree in a certain field of expertise or a field, to have training of some sort. Those are the common sort of barriers of entry into our business these days. Back then, it was these three critical skills. NSA figured out a way to identify me and find me. I didn't even know what I was capable of. They probably had no idea what I was capable of, but they knew what the indicators were. And that's the essence of what I'm trying to get at today, and what I'm curious to keep discovering and researching, and I encourage you to think about it too, and feel free to contribute, and let's talk about it. But what are the things that NSA knew to look for that would identify the potential in someone like me? Because quite frankly, I didn't qualify with their standard criteria, a way a lot of people today, I think, don't qualify to get into this field because they don't fit the popular criteria for what is the minimum that you need to get into. And that's obviously a topic that's been very heated and ongoing for probably many years, but we had nothing to talk about the last couple of years since we're all locked down. But this is stuff that we've talked about on the main show of the podcast, my show of the podcast. When I have had conversations in the past in real time, it's how do I get into the field? How do I re-engineer myself, change professions and sort of start over and get into this field? There's all sorts of variations to discussion. What I'm ultimately getting at, and what I plant a seed in everyone's head to think about, is what are the identifiers that make us recognize someone's potential for being successful in this field, whether it's to be a hacker or to learn hacking skills, be a red teamer, or a pen tester. But of course, again, there's so many different things in this field that you can do. How do we identify the things that make it more likely that somebody's going to be successful and be able to have a career in this field and be good at what they do? The NSA scores of the test, and you can barely see it here, but my scores are very faint, but you can see, hopefully, there are mostly 7s, 8s, and 9s. I had 1 6. I actually, I still have this. I have about a 12 or 15 page document that basically lists every job code that was available at NSA at the time, and it shows the minimum score on which particular test that you needed to get to qualify. And you can see here, just from this little snippet, they were mostly looking for 4s and 5s to get people qualified, where I was in the 7, 8, and 9 range. So I basically scored off the charts. Again, briefly, to highlight, okay, I wasn't those critical skills, but in my 10 years at NSA, here's some of the things that I've done. I give talks. This is the name of the talks, where I go into more detail and tell more stories. But just very quickly, I invented something that had never been done before. I fielded what I believe is the first software-based crypto system that NSA ever produced. They weren't happy about it because they were an engineering build a little black box, but I had to hack the system. I had to rewrite rules that were written for producing secure hardware and figure out what made sense and apply it to how do we produce secure software and a secure application. I'm not saying I would ever repeat this, and I'm not saying it would be secure in any way, shape, or form by today's standards, because that computer wasn't plugged into a network. But at the time, it was fulfilling a need from a customer, and it made sense to me. Why not use a computer to speed up an intensely manual process that would take hours to do sometimes, which is manually encrypting and decrypting a one-time pad. I mentioned earlier the wheel that I invented for special forces, which they ended up using, as near as I can tell, for 10 or 12 years. And of course, I go on in a different talk, more Tales from the Crypt, and tell the origin story of the first pen test team. There's a book that came out a couple years ago called Dark Territory. There's a chapter in that book that has a paragraph that talks about the NSA Red Team working out of a super secret dark chamber called the Pit. I was actually part of the team, and we called our office the Pit, but we sort of collectively came to call ourselves the Pit. But we're famous. We're in a book, so obviously whatever we did had lasting impact. Meanwhile, all the people that were highly qualified, the critical skills, what they typically did at NSA was they came in and they got paid more right out of the gate, sometimes 30 or 40% more than just P on me on the regular pay scale was paying. They immediately got into a 2020 program where they could go to school and pursue their graduate degree and only work part-time, half-time school, 20 hours school, 20 hours of work. They were first in line for promotions because NSA wanted to keep them. They were first in line for the training opportunities, for the diversity opportunities, which is touring different offices within NSA that did different things to be exposed, to get, sort of a liberal arts kind of thing, expose themselves to everything. They would get their master's degree, and 2 months later, they'd leave for private industry where they got an even better paying job. That, with exceptions, that was very much the model. They discovered me, however they did. I did some meaningful, tangible things. All the people that they thought were highly qualified, they threw money at them and opportunity at them, and they left anyway. And am I bitter about it? Perhaps. But so that's sort of the origin story, which I provide as context. I didn't go into NSA thinking I was a hacker, or even using that word in my vocabulary. That obviously came later when I got into the red teaming pen testing thing. But again, I'm trying to think about, okay, how do I know I'm a hacker? What is it about me that identifies the potential of the skill set of being a hacker. I want to use myself as an example, and this is where it would be ordinarily audience participation. So you'll just have to play along, silently wherever you are. But what I would ask if it was a live audience is, show of hands, who else is like this? And the nuance is, and there's overlap, is I'm not just looking for things that are sort of character traits or identifiers like, oh, that person's a hacker. But the things that are the sort of innate about your being, the way you think, the way you approach things, that are indicators that, oh, you might have that hacker mindset, if you will. So, I did a little bit of research online, because I'm quite sure that any idea that I have or anything that I want to pursue, probably 100 other people have done it before me and have done a better job organizing it. I found this one particular article that I thought was kind of cool. If you have a chance, go back on the replay and find this article. It's pretty interesting. But this is kind of interesting stuff. But again, these are sort of it's the reverse, of course. But signs that you would make a lousy hacker. Don't do this. Make a good hacker. But all that aside, these are the next several slides. These are the things that are unique about me, that looking back on it, self-reflection, I think these are indicators that A, I'm a hacker, but B, these are probably indicators that, helped me get in the door at NSA, helped me be able to score well in those tests. I don't think this is an exhaustive or exclusive list, and I am genuinely interested in hearing other people's ideas. Maybe drop it into the Discord server in the chat. But what are the signs and indicators that someone might have the potential or the aptitude for doing well in this field? So I grew up doing puzzles. I was in a puzzle solving family. We used to get these things called Dell crossword puzzle magazines. In these books, there were, of course, crossword puzzles, which hopefully you've heard of, but there was other types of puzzles, and these are the ones that I like to do more often than just the normal crossword. Something called a diagram list, which is a crossword puzzle, but not only do you have to solve the clues and get the words, you have to figure out the grid. A little bit higher level of difficulty, but a fun puzzle. I actually did the crypto quizzes where you'd have to guess words and the letters would pop into the grid, and eventually you would have a quote or a phrase, and you could actually work it both ways. As you started to get more letters in a word in the grid, you might recognize the word, which would give you more letters to go back over to the questions of the specific words that you're trying to guess, similar to a crossword puzzle. These are all Caesar ciphers. In fact, these were in the puzzle magazines. They used to be in the funny pages, the comics pages of newspapers, the ones that I grew up with. So I was doing cryptography long before I ever did it for a living. But the most important one, type of puzzle that I used to like to do was something called a logic problem. And in a karma type of twist of fate, when I first started at NSA in this cryptographic organization where I did the software and I did the whiz wheel, I had a mentor, and the mentor was a cryptologist that had been at NSA for 15 or 20 years already. He taught me a lot, and he really, I would credit him. Everybody should have a mentor that you can credit as putting you on the path to having a successful, rewarding career. For me, it's job satisfaction. The twist of fate is this person that was my mentor, as it turned out, used to, as a side job, as a hobby, write logic problems for these Dell crossword puzzle magazines. So I used to do puzzles that he would write, and then I ended up working with him, and he became my mentor. I'm left-handed. I feel like in this industry, there are more left-handed people than the national average, the worldwide average of how many left-handed people there are. If you're left-handed, hopefully you'll understand the difficulties that we face. You right-handed people, don't have to listen right now because you don't understand. But we live in a world where everything is right-handed, and when you're left-handed, that means things are backwards. I am still scarred from my first day of first grade in elementary school, where back in those days, this was the 1960s, the schools would give you supplies. They'd give you a little box, and you get pens and pencils and rulers, and the most coveted item was a pair of scissors, and everybody else got these little shiny pointy scissors. I got these rounded, blunt-edged, loose, dull scissors, and it always kind of bothered me, like, why can't I have the pointy scissors? I'm left-handed. I'm gonna put my eye out. I still have issues. I very often feel like I don't fit in with the crowd. I always feel like an outsider. I think part of it is because going through especially junior and senior high school and even college, if there's a left-handed desk in the classroom, it tends to be pushed back in the back row off to the corner. So to this day, if I go into an auditorium or a convention center, or, want to attend a talk at a conference, I tend to like to sit in the back left corner. I don't know why it is, but that's the way it is. I've got trust issues. I've got lots of issues. If you have issues, you're either a normal human or maybe it's an indicator. This is where I'm trying to put myself out there a little bit. I count things. I don't tell people that a lot, but I'm putting it out there. Pretty much every set of stairs that I ever go up and down, I'm always counting the stairs. If I'm driving out on the highway, I'm counting the dotted lines, between intersections or from some arbitrary point A to point B. I would ask you the question, and I have to give you the punchline, but these are sort of depictions, I think, of people that might be on the spectrum at some point. They might be ADHD. They might be CDO, which, by the way, is OCD, but in alphabetical order. There tends to be a lot of people in our industry that have these kind of, what society says are abnormalities, but they actually make us really, really good at doing the things that we need to be good at. The ability to see things and analyze things, and I'm not saying it's me necessarily. I see this in others, but just brilliant people that are just, for whatever reason, sort of socially awkward. And you might have picked up on it, especially talking about the NSA experience. I might have some anger issues. Other random things, like I'm one of the types of people that actually take the tags off of the furniture, even though it's illegal. I happen to be from a musical family. I attempt to play guitar. That's me. I think when I was 4 years old, when somebody gave me my first little ukulele. Clearly, I'm left-handed. I don't have a good depiction for it, but for some reason, I can see what's wrong with things. I'll watch somebody give a conference talk, and I'll see a typo in their slide, or they'll use the wrong word, or it's made me good as a consultant going in trying to find whether companies are doing the right things or not. I for some reason, I can see the logic error very often, and as an example. This slide bugs me because I don't have an example. I don't have a graphical example to depict this. It kind of bugs me. Little odd things like, being able to see the world, not necessarily for what it is. Most people know that joke. But that's where I invite you. That's just me. That's just a glimpse of me. What are your experiences? What do you see as indicators? Not just the character traits or the identifiers from they're a hacker, but what makes you or others likely to have the potential for success at being a hacker, at being a cybersecurity professional. I mentioned earlier that I'd given a brief version of this talk earlier this week. I was actually down in Asheville, North Carolina. I was invited by the Carolina Cyber Center, which is operating out of Montreat College. They've joined an organization. I'm only glimpsing and beginning to understand, but I'm sharing this because this is an opportunity for you guys in North Carolina. They're part of something called the Carolina Cyber Network. So if you're someone that's, if you're listening today, it's because you want to learn. If you're participating in BSides, you consider yourself a student. If you happen to be an actual, like college student or even a high school student looking to get into college and you live in North Carolina, there's this whole network of colleges and universities that have gotten together trying to figure out how to better identify people that are going to succeed in this career, but give them the right types of education so they can actually go out and have jobs in this career. So just a quick acknowledgement, especially since this is essentially a local resource for you guys, in the state of North Carolina. So, my bottom line here to some degree is whether you identify as a hacker or not, to me, at one level, it doesn't matter, but that's easy for me to say, I guess, because I am a hacker. But it's not something that means that you, it doesn't really mean anything at the end of the day. You can be smart and successful and do well at your job, find what it is that you're good at, what it is that you have the potential for. I want to take the last few moments to tell you a quick story. Not sure if anybody knows who this person is. If you've heard of a book that's relatively old at this point, this is Robert Fulghum. Fulghum, I don't know how to pronounce his name. He wrote a book called All I Really Need to Know I Learned in Kindergarten. Speaking of which, just for fun, here's my actual kindergarten class. The photograph was taken in 1968. And in case you're wondering, that's me. But I want to take a few minutes, and I know we're running short on getting close to the top of the hour, but I want to read a short essay that Robert Fulghum wrote just to give you a sort of food for thought. So let me open up and tell you real quick, and I apologize for reading something, but I think it's worth it for you. So Robert Fulghum writes, over the last couple of years, I've been a frequent guest in schools, most often invited by kindergartens and colleges. The environments differ only in scale. In the beginner's classroom and on university campuses, the same opportunities and facilities exist. Tools for reading and writing are there, words and numbers, areas devoted to scientific experiment, labels, labs and work boxes, those things necessary for the arts, paint, music, costumes, rooms to dance, so on and so forth. In kindergarten, the resources are in one room with access for all. In college, the resources are in separate buildings with limited availability, but the most apparent difference is in the self-image of the students. Ask a kindergarten class, how many of you can draw? All hands shoot up. Of course we can draw, all of us. What can you draw? Anything. How about a dog eating a fire truck in a jungle? Sure. How big do you want it? How many of you can sing? All hands, of course. We can sing. What can you sing? Anything. What if you don't know the words? No problem. We'll make it up. Let's sing now. Why not? How many of you dance? Unanimous again. What kind of music do you like to dance to? Any kind. Let's dance now. Sure. Why not? Do you like to act in plays? Yes. Do you play musical instruments? Yes. Do you write poetry? Yes. Can you read and write and count? Yes. We're learning all that stuff now. Their answer is yes. Over and over again, yes. The children are confident in spirit, infinite in resources, and eager to learn. Everything is still possible. Try those same questions on a college audience. A small percentage of the students will raise their hands when asked if they can draw or dance or sing or paint or act or play an instrument. Not infrequently, those who do raise their hands will want to qualify their response with their limitations. Well, I only play piano, I only draw horses, I only dance to rock and roll, I only sing in the shower. When asked why the limitations, college students answer they do not have talent, are not majoring in the subject, or have not done any of those things since about the third grade. Or worse, they're embarrassed for others to see them sing or dance or act. You can imagine the response to the same questions asked of an older audience. The answer, no, none of the above. So the question Robert Fulghum asks is, what went wrong between kindergarten and college? What happened to yes, of course I can? So my question to you and my encouragement to you as our time wraps up is, what happened between when you were a kindergartner and where you are today? Because this is true of all of us. Where did we build in our limitations? And I want to encourage you to remember, especially as you pursue your learning and further your career in cybersecurity and hacking and pen testing, whatever it is that you're doing, realize you are capable of doing anything. Anybody can do this. But I think the important point is, I give you a couple sort of parting thoughts here. The important thing, more than trying to get to a particular place, is to find out that place where you're best suited to be. Find out what your potential is. Learn how to recognize the potential in yourself and others. The things that are indicators that will make you right for the job. And my wish for everyone, and this is something I say to people, again, in the former times that have approached me, how do I get into this career? How do I exceed or excel or advance myself? Is expose yourself to as much as you can. Don't limit yourself. Find out what it is that you are good at, or have the potential or the aptitude or the interest or the curiosity for, and pursue that. But also find out what it is that you like to do. And the sweet spot, if you're lucky, and I've been very lucky, what you're good at and what you like to do are the same thing. And to me, that's sort of the ultimate indicator of success. But maybe I'm wrong. But, so I leave this with you. Enjoy the rest of your day. Enjoy all the talks, especially the international talks. That's so cool. But let's figure out this thing together. My question and my ongoing research is, what are the indicators that someone has the potential to excel and be successful in the career of cybersecurity? And by all means, don't stop questioning as a way to push back, but also as a way to learn. Here's my contact information. I do welcome contact. People reach out to me, please. Somebody actually called me one time, which is rare, but find me on the Twitters. Feel free to send me an email. Thank you very much to BSides Charlotte for letting me be here today. I hope I gave you at least something to think about. Hopefully there's some of you out there who says, oh, wow, I'm just like Jeff Mann. I'm weird and warped and have issues. I can be somebody. Have a great day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff, for that amazing keynote presentation. A lot of good information covered in there. So I wanted to jump back in, and just in case there were questions or anything from chat, please go ahead and post them for Jeff in the Keynote channel, and I'll relay those to Jeff to make it a little bit easier. So just waiting for them to come in. There were some snide comments and some other things that you'll have to go back and read in the Keynote channel as you were presenting, Jeff. So
I look forward to it. I am known to give a snide comment or two myself.
Yep. You at some point in this field, you have to get a sense of humor somehow. Otherwise, I don't know how you would do that successfully without. It'd be a lot more bitter.
Yeah, there's a saying that I got in a fortune cookie many years ago. It's a common saying, and I always get it mixed up because I overthink things, which is one of those other characteristics. But life is a tragedy for those who feel, and a comedy for those who think. Or switch that, one or the other. Yeah, that's one of those other. If you can't laugh at this stuff, and unfortunately, too many of us have. We will pursue more permanent solutions to our problems, which is
yeah, no kidding.
Of course, tragic.
Yeah, we definitely don't want any of those.
Yeah.
Yeah, and plenty of other vices to go along with it.
Right.
Leading up to. So it looks like, just kind of keeping an eye on chat here, it looks like we're good on questions. I'm not seeing anybody posting. There's one last
Snide comment.
Yeah, last slide comments. No, lots of thank yous, lots of excellent presentations and whatnot. So very much appreciate the presentation. Everybody, you'll get to read in just a moment. The comments have been great. So thank you very much. And for everybody else, track 1 and track 2 should be kicking off here in just a moment. So stay tuned for that. And Jeff, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Again, thank you for letting me have the opportunity. And again, I encourage everyone to think about what it is that makes me who I am, whether you identify as a hacker or not, and what are the indicators so that we can fill the openings and help the next generation. What are the things to look for beyond the STEM and beyond the certain certifications that we love or hate and so on and so forth. Because again, and this was, as I said, it crystallized for me the other day when I gave this talk to educators. I wouldn't get into your colleges today, with the qualifications that you have. I wouldn't have gotten into the college that I went to, which means I wouldn't have gotten into NSA because I didn't have the prerequisites that they were looking for. So, if for nothing else, we've got to, as a community, we have to come up with a different set of indicators, because we all know that the ones that everybody's pointing to are not, let's say, not necessarily the right indicators, but that means we got to come up with the other indicators, and that's what I'm pursuing, and I hope I have at least intrigued others to think about it, and let's pool our resources and think about and promote how do we find the talent, how do we identify the skill sets for all the different things we do in this industry. That's really what I'm working on in my brain this week and last week and next week and for the weeks to come. So thank you again for letting me be here.
Yeah, absolutely. A pleasure, as always, to spend a little time chit-chatting too. So
sure.
Thank you. And for everybody else, check your talks. Speaker ops should be kicking those off here momentarily. I'm looking at the other room where speaker ops resides. So we're ready to go for track 1 and track 2. Head over there, and thanks for attending.
All right, thanks you.
CTF intro and instructions first. That'll be in track 1. All right, thanks, Jeff.
All right, take care, everyone. I'll try to pop in on the Discord throughout the day, and have a great day, everyone.